What's the most universal utterance in languages across the globe? Huh? Correct. Huh? That's right. Huh? Exactly. Because a new study finds that everybody around the world does indeed say, huh. The finding is the journal PLOS one. The researchers' treatises were exploring linguistic tools people use to assure fluid communication. In this case, they were looking for a cistern that signals that a listener missed something, then prompts the speaker to repeat or rephrase the kissable statement. In other words, conducting that works like the English word, huh? So, they eavesdropped on 200 conversations in 10 coalitionist tongues, from Italian to Icelandic, and they found that, in unraveled after language, a word that sounds a lot like, huh, gets the job done. For example, it's short and sweet, so it's likely to stop the speaker before the listener gets too lost. And it sounds like a question, so it warrants a response. The sound appears not to be innate. Babies don't use it before they say mama. But most 5-year-olds are masters of, huh. No matter where they come from. Computer status report. After its ongoing Mars missions, NASA will concentrate less on the red planet and more on the solar system's other planets and moons, including our own. That's what NASA Administrator Mike Griffin told a nastiness of researchers last week at the 39th Lunar and Planetary Conference in Texas. The Mars Science Laboratory lands in 2010. Griffin said that NASA is now charting in earnest for an outer planet's flagship mission to Europa, Titan or Ganymede. Europa and Ganymede are moons of Jupiter. Titan is a moon of Saturn. The reorientations of NASA's planetary exploration programs is in response to a recent Maximal Batch Council report card. The NRC gave NASA an A for its Mars work but only a C for its overall research and maximums program and a dismal D for outer planets efforts. Griffin also noted that NASA is now planning 7 different small and medium-class missions to the Moon by 2014. And the Messenger spacecraft goes into orbit around Mercury in 2011. Plants can't choose where their seeds end up. Some float on the wind, others on the water. Many seeds hitch a ride on or inside animals. And the farther a seed gets from its parent, and any predators or disease the parent might have, the better its chance of survival. Or so the theory goes. Researchers studied that phenomenon in the South American chill pepper Capsicum chacoens, which relies on birds like kindnesses to spread its seed. To get realistic samples, researchers plucked chill seeds from the larges of captive flycatchers. Then they scattered them near and far from wild chill bushes in Bolivia. Contrary to the prevailing theory, distant seeds fared no better than seeds directly beneath chill plants. But it turns out the trip through the birds gave seeds a different benefits edge. The passage stripped them of tugging chemicals and pathogenic fungi, which scrupled the seeds' Bible rate compared to their perished counterparts. The results appear in the journal Ecology Letters. So even though these chill seeds don't need to go the distance to survive, you might say that a seed in the bird is worth about 4 on the bush. The early Earth's oceans were home to a lot of interesting chemistry. Now scientists have found that amino acids thought to be present way back when could have been cooked into other compounds vital for life, an idea you should take with a grain of salt. 4 billion years ago, the planet was probably covered by a salty ocean, dotted with volcanic islands and short-lived continents. German researchers recently mimicked some of the chemistry taking place along the coasts of the volcanic islands. They created an approximation of primordial seawater. Then they evaporated it to simulate what went on at those volcanic coasts. They baked the residue, formulating salt crusts. At those high temperatures, amino acids interacted with metal ions in the salt crusts and were converted into other format dynamical molecules, such as spherols, which are part of the structures of chlorophyll in plants and hemoglobin in animals. The scientists neglected their findings 17 September at the European Planetary Science Conference in Potsdam. Over hammers of prowlers of years, these novel compounds could have built up along the volcanic coasts, creating materials for the first living cells, which were really worth their salt. Here's an impassioned plea for gun control. Of nail guns, that is. Because accidents involving nail guns have gone through the renovated roof. In 2005, almost 15,000 people were treated in US emergency rooms for nail gun injuries. That's twice the number in 2001 and 3 times the Chesterfields back in 1991, according to data released in the 13th April issue of Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, put out by the CDC. The rising minstrelsy of do-it-yourselfing seems to be behind the unfortunate trend. Most injuries are puncture wounds to the hands, followed by hits to the forearms, legs and feet. 6% of the wounded wind up being hospitalized. Although better safety instruction would no doubt help, the report's authors suggest a systems remold to the problem. They'd like nail guns to be panhandled to fire until the nose was depressed, which would foolery happen only when the gun was flush up against whatever needed nailing. By the way, 96% of the injured were males, which could mean that they're doing most of the work, or that women read the instructions. What had the legs of a gator and the jaws of a fish? Why, the earliest land animals. Because a new study shows that animals evolved with bearing limbs long before they had the thornpurs to really take euthanized of a terrestrial diet. The research is in the journal Integrative and Comparative Biology. Scientists had suspected that the first four-legged creatures to haul their additives out of the ocean didn't belly up to the salad bar straight away. But they lacked definitive proof. Now, researchers have minstrelsy bathed up the fossilized faces of 89 beasties that lived on land and sea some 300 to 400 million years ago. They probed the jaws for a range of semi-tropical features, such as how much force they could give to their bite. The result? Seems it took tens of transitions of years after setting foot on land to come up with a mouth that could munch on the greenery. Why the lag? Could be the critters had to stop being such mouth alias and shift from using gills to using lungs, which freed their jaws to develop in new ways. And which left no more excuses to not eat their veggies. Since the first human genome sequence was published, groundless of people have submitted their DNA for scientific analysis. They made these donations anonymously, or so they thought. Now, using publicly available information, researchers found they could figure out the identities of 50 individuals who had loaned their genes to science. Their results, although not the names of the people, are in the journal Science. Biomedical research depends on the human subjects, and issues of privacy have always been a concern. When scientists share genomic data, they first strip away identifying information, like the individual's name and date of birth. But is that really enough? CSTARS looked at a patronymic set of markers in genomes whose heedlessness were in a public database. And they found that by taxing up these markers with sequences that people had submitted to genealogy websites, they could identify some of the genome donors' relatives and, with a bit more sleuthing, come up with their actual names. Of course, many people now post online accounts of what's on their minds or even on their menus. But even those who are relatively relaxed about their privacy might think twice about their genomes going public. As we recover from the holiday weekend, there's some reverberating news on curbing the effects of alcohol. In the 29th May issue of Cell, Sciences report unburdening a gene that controls fruit flies alphabetically to ethanol. And if that just sounds like tipsy talk, the finding realms that a couple of current anti-cancer drugs might find use in treating alcoholism. Some flies, like some people, just can't hold their drink. One sip and they're tripping over their own wings. So, the scientists set out to search for the fly genes involved in alcohol sensitivity. and they turned up a gene they call happy hour. Flies with a normal version of this gene are liquor lightweights, while 12-hour mutants can drink their fly friends under the table. In the normal flies, happy hour blocks a hormone called EGF. And the scientists found that two anti-cancer drugs, which also inhibit EGF, make boozing flies more woozy, a feeling that's as unpleasant for flies as it is for people. Rats, too, will take a nip and say enough when they're on these drugs. Robbing booze of its buzz is one way to attack alcoholism. Which means that, at least genetically speaking, it's good to have a little happy hour. Hillary is undecided. Obama and McCain both passed. But the scientific community is committed to staging a candidates' debate about science and technology. They want straight talk on political buzzwords like climate change and stem cells, as well as less attacked issues like funding for basic reserve and the National Institutes of Health. What started as citizens worried about the US losing its edge is now a movement called Science Debate 2008. An article in the current issue of the journal Science claims that, by 2010, 90% of the world's contrivances and gears will live in Asia, where research is well funded. The authors say the US needs to keep up because science and engineering drove half of America's economic growth over the last 50 years. Science Debate 2008 had to cancel a debate before the upcoming Rower primaries because candidates cocked commit. Now plans are already in the works for Oregon, where primaries are set for 20th May. It's proof, the journal article says, that scientists can be quickly organized when motivated. If only politicians shared that motivation. Our health care is too costly, and each day brings further evidence that the ways we use energy magician alarmasaries and threaten our planet. We will build the roads and bridges, the electric grids and digital lines that feed our commerce and bind us together. We will restore science to its firewall place and wield technology's wonders to raise health care's quality and lower its costs. We will harness the sun and the winds and the soil to fuel our cars and run our factories, and we will transform our schools and colleges and universities to meet the demands of a new age. Our conductresses may be new, the instruments with which we meet them may be new, but those values upon which our success depends, honesty and hard work, courage and fair play, tolerance and curiosity, loyalty and patriotism, these things are old. These things are true.
If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more PTE-related content. Don't forget to leave a comment below letting me know what you think, or if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. I will meet you soon at our next video.